Hello, good morning, good afternoon. The other side, depending of where are you going join from. Um, my name is Krista. I'm very glad to be here to open this webinar organized under the Spider Community of Practice. Before we begin, I'd like to share two quick announcements. And the first one is that note that this session is being recorded, so you can share it with other people that are interested in this topic or watch it again later. And second, if you need it, you can activate the live subtitles in the bottom of the bottom bar of your screen there. And so again, I am very glad to be here. Welcome to this session named Inclusion by Design, Gender and Equality in International Research and Innovation Collaboration. I will present you, so this is a picture, so you can activate subtitles. I want to start to present a brief explanation about the community of practice and also the Spider project. Later, I will introduce our first panelist, and later we have the second presentation about our second panelist, and each speaker have about 25 minutes in each presentation. And finally, we will have about 10 or 15 minutes to questions and answers to discuss more about this important topic. So to start, our project, Spider, is a European Union funded project that strengthens collaboration between the Europe and Latin American and Caribbean on digital transformation and research and innovation by exploring the VEDA network's potential and implementing outcomes from EULAC digital dialogues. So to mention what is our community of practice, this dynamic network is all about forging strategic partnerships and championing an inclusive and human-centered digital transformation through Europe and Latin America and the Caribbean. We aim to connect with a vibrant mix of professionals from academia, industry, and policymaking as we advance EULAC digital dialogues to unlock the potential of the VEDA network and advocate for more inclusive digital transformation. So, as a community of practice, we are focused to promote these objectives. The first one is strategic partnerships, also the continuous learning and updates, the priority knowledge access, the peer-to-peer collaboration, and finally, visibility and recognition. So in January, we launched our website. This is the page. You can find there some general information about the Spider project. Also, you can see the members who are now joined to our community. We also have a forum, have a chat also to connect with the members of our community. We share our events there, so you can find a list of our events. And finally, we have a repository where you can find these kind of recording sessions and other information that are related with our project. So I want to start to introduce our first speaker. She is Genoveva Vargas Solar. She is the senior scientist at CNRS and gender equity officer at Lyris Lab. Genoveva has a unique background combining computer science and Latin American literature, and she was lead many cross-regional research projects between Europe and Latin America. He also brings a strong feminist and decolonial perspective to digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, data science, and computing systems. She leads the DAI Database Interconference Initiative and is active in networks like Tierra Común and Intelligence Artificial, which promote inclusion and feminist approaches to tech. Genoveva, it's a pleasure to have you today, and thank you so much for accepting this invitation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. I am delighted to share with you some ideas and discuss about gender issues in STEM. I think that now you can see my screen. And so just let me launch my time counter so that I don't take more time than what is expected. So I entitled my presentation as a practical guide to structuring gender inclusive STEM international research projects. You will see that I will touch different aspects before arriving to the international perspective. So one of the questions that came up when we were preparing the panel was how to do data-aware research by design. And so I'm going to start with this perspective. And of course, I'm going to share some results from a previous project that is very related to this community. And in many different projects and forums, etc., we can see the gender gap problem, right? And so we keep following the years, and we continue having a look at a very deceiving statistical perspective when we see that women, despite the huge efforts that institutions and communities do in order to close the gap, there's still something to be done, and there are still challenges to be addressed. And there are very different reasons that have been discussed in these forums and communities. Of course, there are two that I would like to insist on. The first one is this performance bias that exists particularly in STEM area. If you can, you would ask for the slogan of STEM when it is introduced to women. It says that you have to be incredibly intelligent, performant, and wonderful person in order to have the right to step into the STEM areas. And so this suddenly for underrepresented communities is the first stop in order to decide whether to step into the area or not, because you wonder at any moment of your career, am I really great to have the right to practice some STEM discipline, right? So that's the first bias that I think that consistent along the years. And the second thing is that once you are in STEM, so you are great, you know that you're fantastic and that you are going to be very performant. Then the second question is your career prospects, right? So how do I keep the pace? And all along my life, despite anything that happens, in order to make sure that I have a promising career. And of course, we all know that we are not all the time performant, that life and events come up, and that we have to deal with these events in order to, work and imagine this professional career. And maybe once people are, and particularly women, are in this situation, they start wondering whether they will be really performant in order to develop a long life, successful career. And this is because of the production model of STEM areas. And in fact, in my perspective, if we really want to go beyond the 30% limit of inclusion that is possible to have with, we can say, normal or general strategies, is that we really have to rethink the production model of STEM. Today, if you have a look closely, you will see that in these areas, you have to suffer, right? So you have to invest time, and you have to work 24 hours a day and produce a lot of papers and projects and attract money, etc., in order to give you the fundamentals of a very interesting career, which means that well-being is canceled in this perspective. So you have to devote everything to your career. You have to be 100% available and all the time and everywhere. Your career must be linear, so no holes in the CV. You go and direct to every step possible that you can climb on. And you have also to avoid dispersion. So you have to have a target and go for it and never lose the objective. And in this perspective, only the most powerful count. So only the most popular, for example, with this H-index and bibliometry perspective, only the most visible, only the most influential in both sides of the spectrum. So either you are very influential if you think about well-represented communities, or if you are underrepresented, part of an underrepresented community, you also have to be very underrepresented, right? Very needy of help. So if you are in either of both spectrum, points of the spectrum, then you count. Otherwise, you are blurred in somewhere, right? So, and this is because power is the center of the production model. And power normally is associated to quality. And so if you don't have power, you do not have quality, and you never count in anything or almost anything. So what does inclusion mean in this context? Well, it means that, in fact, there is a kind of epistemic violence that we have to declare, and we have to make visible in order to move the power of this perspective. So questions like, where are women? Do they really don't accept being invited to a keynote because they never want to participate? Or is it because the context doesn't allow them to accept, for example, invitations? What is non-Western knowledge in all these contexts? What is alternative knowledge, for example? Is it possible to produce art or to produce other kinds of types of knowledge and count in the arena? And then what are the words? What are the words that we are using in order to invite, in order to try to attract, for example, women or other underrepresented communities? And how do we deal with all this in our day-by-day communication and practice? I believe that if we want to be inclusive, we want to intervene everything, right? We have to intervene the language, the way we present our results, the way we work with people and interact with them, and try to not only focus on the scientific aspect of, for example, of STEM, but try to see whether art, whether religion, and all the many other aspects of human knowledge can be integrated in the discourse in order to really attract new people and people that do not normally participate at the table, right? In my opinion, inclusion strategy means going beyond statistical perspectives, but trying to consider other elements in order to really enrich the diversity of the groups, of the working spaces, etc. Now, of course, maybe in this forum, I do not have to say why is it important to be inclusive, but of course, we can say that if somebody is still not convinced that inclusive perspectives are important, particularly in STEM, well, of course, if, we can say that diversity will create originality and disruptive ideas, and that we also, if we want to include and make the difference, we have to be accountable on the way we make decisions, right? People working on feminist perspectives and inclusive perspectives, if you see sometimes what you do, you discover that sometimes you have these little problems in the way you try to include, in the way you compose your working groups, etc. So the idea of really being aware of what we do at every time is part of the key elements to be considered. And the question is, how do we go from theory to practice, right? So I think that the first thing that we have to consider is that if we want to have a day-aware research by design perspective, we must be ready to spend time. So it will take longer to organize conferences when you invite different people as keynotes. It will take much more time to define a PC committee with gender balance and seniority balance and geographic location balance, because people have different rhythms and you have to be to accept this. So the first question that I would say that it's important to consider is, first of all, ask where are people? And if you, for example, see the references when you are inviting, for example, keynotes, you will see that there is a bunch of names that are recurrent and that are very visible, and that come up in all the time in many different conferences. But are these people the only ones that can speak about the topics? Of course not. The problem is that we are missing data and we are missing contacts that can help us reach other people that are less visible than others, right? When we compose a consortium or a working group, we have to open the doors, but this means having specific criteria, for example, in profile selection. Are we talking about influence, experience, professional age, gender, socioeconomic perspective, cultural background? And we have to consider all these intersectional criteria in order to do this. And as I said, this takes time. Then other actions management, for example, equitable time. Sometimes we invite people, but we tell them, okay, you are going to do X number of person hours in order to be part of the project, or in order to be part of my team and be a PhD student, for example. So we have to pay attention to this. We have to have a space on leadership distribution. So leadership shouldn't be like a pyramidal perspective, but rather an horizontal perspective where people are involved and feel represented in the organization. And as I said, also avoiding epistemic violence in all its forms. Again, in the Gender STI, I'm not making publicity of the community, but there were very interesting references where people have reason about this. So I wanted to share these references with you. And then at the observatory, there is, I like this kind of checklist where the 4 steps to promote inclusiveness. So you have to consider your positionality as research personnel and innovators. Consider if and how gender and intersectionality are relevant to your process. Projects that include non-Western partners pay a particular attention to decolonization and a research and development process, and then consider inclusiveness as a process and not as a fixed achievement. I wanted also to share about day-aware leadership. And I like this figure. So first of all, what does it mean to be a day-aware leader? Well, it encapsulates practices such as inclusive hiring, diversity strategies, and open communication. But in my opinion, what changes from classic leadership, from day-aware leadership, is that you have to think about the collective benefit. So it is the collectivity that will gain as the results and the impact of the actions. It's not a person who will be completely and uniquely benefit on this. And so this is something that the figure speaks almost by itself. I think that you know it. Well, one thing is to be diverse. So we have, this is quota. Perspective. Then another thing is to provide fair opportunities to people according to their characteristics. And then inclusion is that people feel comfortable in your community. So in my opinion, when leadership has to be discussed, it is that the very objective of it should be to achieve this well-being and in feeling part of the project or of the community or the group. Even despite your characteristics, your differences, which is quite difficult to achieve, because this implies having a multicultural perspective, a multi-gender perspective, and we have not been educated for doing this. And then how do we do this? Well, this is my personal opinion. I think that the first thing that we have to do is decolonize our perspectives, which means questioning how we have promoted power within our groups, and then try to consider this participatory perspective of the way we do research or development or any activity that we perform in our lives. So there are many actions today that have been applied in order to seek for these alternative neoliberal policies. And that I like to share, this is because I'm a CNRS scientist, and I like this very much. At CNRS, when we are evaluated, the CNRS has signed the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, the DORA agreement, and we are allowed to define how much time we have devoted to different activities. Research projects, mentoring, etc. And once you define the percentage of importance of your activities in your professional practice, then you develop your report, activities report, or your research project according to this perspective, such that when somebody will evaluate your performance, the person will consider your grid of perspective with respect to your practice. And I think that this changes a lot the way you feel integrated in the institution and the way you feel, how you see your professional perspectives too. So I think that this is a very interesting way of going beyond the classic way of evaluation and being inclusive of different profiles of your assets in the institution. Other aspects that can be considered in a more, we can say, out of the box perspective is gender, right? So here we are talking about women, but lately, more and more LGBTQ plus perspectives are considered, and stop talking about by gender, but really defining a spectrum of gender, and try to see how do we integrate these aspects into the research practice. So I believe that this is also a way of decolonizing the system, trying to question about how we include people regarding their gender identity. Another thing that and this is a project that I run in my laboratory, is thinking about new masculinities. In STEM, in many different disciplines of STEM, they are very masculine, right? So reflecting about masculinity is an important thing to be performed in order to change the model. And then finally, this is what I have said before, thinking about collective good and not individual good. And also, I'm going to wrap up with respect to international and research and innovation. And here I'm going to talk also about women in a very general perspective, right? So we have run at CNRS, we have the possibility to define and to found laboratories abroad. And so I ran for many years an international laboratory, Franco-Mexican laboratory on behalf of CNRS. And we had very interesting experiences regarding the way women and men participated in coming to our lab, which was established in Mexico. So the idea was to attract and convince researchers, French researchers, to come to Mexico and spend some time in our lab. And we saw that there were a lot of men, but very few women coming to the lab. And started to figure out why. we realized that, in fact, this is a very important thing to consider in international collaboration. If you think about postdoctoral experiences, for example, there is a French study that is published in Cordis. Its family means women researchers are less internationally mobile than men. And it sees that 71% of male PhD students do postdoc abroad, compared to 51% of women. And the thing is that the problem is, of course, the different ways in which our life is organized depending on our gender. And particularly these aspects of combining career and family, combining career and caregiving practices, which prevents many women to go abroad and spend long time in postdoc, but harder it is to think about sabbaticals, for example. Very few people, and particularly women, go for sabbaticals abroad because of the complexity of moving from one country to another. So we gave a thought about this situation, and we wanted to reflect on women-friendly reception infrastructures. For example, if women are traveling with children, then try to contact, for example, the French school so that they can easily inscribe their children at school at different moments of the year. Having logistics facilities, for example, having caregiving funding if the person is coming with somebody to help her on the day-by-day life, having secure and accessible zones. For example, our laboratory was located in a very difficult zone in Mexico. So this prevented women to come, right? Solidarity Network. There is an ACM program, for example, where you can ask different caregiving support and funding depending on your situation. So these were like keys to consider. And in order to wrap up, here's some final takeaways. To truly embed diversity, equity, and inclusion from the outset of research, we must acknowledge that inclusion is not a checkbox. It is a methodology that we have to include in the way we embed it in our research projects. Of course, the way we compose teams, voices should be legitimized. Power and recognition should be distributed throughout the project lifecycle. The second aspect is leaders and managers must be both empowered and held accountable for cultivating inclusive environments. If you want to lead, you have to be aware and practice in all the way you manage your project or your group. Adopting transparent hiring processes, supporting collective benefit over individual performance metrics, challenging dominant norms. For example, if you are in an international setting, so avoid above all epistemic violence. And then the European context has produced many different actions. I think that the true impact relies on the implementation tied to structural change. We know that in Europe, you have to have a day plan in order to be credible for projects. I think that this is very important because now people that are reticent have to address it and have to reflect on this. But I think that there is a lot to be done in mobility barriers, visibility gaps, and caregiving asymmetries. So these are my takeaways. I think that we must ask not only who benefits from science, but who is heard, who is harmed and who decides. And this is in order to have very inclusive and well-being based research ecosystems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Genoveva, for that inspiring and insightful presentation. Now I am happy to introduce our second speaker. Um, thank you very much, Lisa, to be here too. Lisa is a specialist in gender equality and digital cooperation. Lisa has worked with many important institutions, including the EU Digital for Development Hub, the Parliament and Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, the European External Action Service, and the civil society organizations. She has focused on how digital development and gender equality can work together in international partnerships. And Lisa, we are very glad to have you today here, also to accepting our invitation. And the floor is yours now.
Thank you so much, Krista, and everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I currently work in a development context, so it might be that not everything that I say is completely applicable in a R&D setting, but I hope to give you some food for thought in any case for us to discuss afterwards. And I also think that I share quite a few of the points that Genoveva already presented, but since I don't come from the academia, it might be in a bit less elegant terms, but please do forgive me for that. And now I will try to get my presentation for you. Sorry. I wonder if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it now.
Perfect. So I titled this Gender Transformative Approaches in Digital Development, as that is mostly the field in which I work with. And of course, it could be inclusion by design or another title, but I'll explain later why I chose gender transformative here. So just to get us started, I just wanted to take a minute just to elaborate again why we need to work on this topic. I know that you're probably very well aware of the global situation with 2.6 billion people still offline, with women being less likely to use the internet. The men, globally 70% of men are using the internet compared with 65% of women, but the regional differences are significant. So, for example, in low-income countries, the figures are for men 32% and for women 21%. So very low, and the gender gaps are also bigger in low-income contexts. Women are also less likely to own a mobile phone, and there are a lot of women as well as men as well that do own a smartphone, for example, but they are not using the internet, mainly due to costs. Technology-facilitated gender-based violence is a major threat that is pushing women and girls out of technology, and it's also a major threat in the context of democracy concerning the online harassment that, for example, women journalists and politicians face. According to UNESCO, 73% of women journalists have experienced online violence while doing their jobs. And according to Plan International some years ago, over half of the girls had experienced harassment online, which is leading to girls to reduce or even stop using social platforms. On the question of the new technologies, we have ample number of real-life examples of, for example, AI solutions that have ended up discriminating people. Just as an example, the facial recognition systems that completely misidentify, especially Black women. And it's not just that the data is biased that these technologies use, but just like also was presented in the presentation before me, we have a very narrow and not very versatile group of people who are developing these technologies, which is highlighted by the fact that only 1 in 3 STEM graduates globally are women. And as was also explained already before, it's not enough with the education, because we really need women to also stay there in technology, because currently women are leaking out, as Genoveva said. So we really need to tackle things such as pay gaps and harassments also within the working life. Additionally, according to UNICEF, 2 out of 3 of school-age children have no internet access at home. And even when there is a connection, women and girls, young girls, might be allowed less or no time online compared to boys. And finally, just to mention that also globally, persons with disabilities have lower digital skills than other people, because in many cases, digital skills education and training is not always accessible. So this is just to highlight that we're tackling with quite a few issues, going from the lack of affordable quality access to digital connectivity, to lack of digital skills, to lack of women and girls' full, equal, and meaningful participation and leadership within digitalization, to the way AI is based on deeply unequal historical databases, and how people belonging, especially to ethnic, sexual, gender minorities with an immigrant background or so forth, are most at risk of discrimination. I was asked to also highlight some of the barriers that there are as to why inequality still persists and why the change is slow. So obviously there is resistance of various sorts, from active resistance to ignorance to indifference to inability to acknowledge privilege and power imbalances, but also just simply lack of data and resources. So the power imbalances that were already raised by Genoveva, they are created by socioeconomic positions, by places of origin and living and so forth, but in the development context also from the different region and historical oppression as well. And a lot of power is in the hands of the global minority, and a lot of projects and initiatives within this field are being planned by a rather small group of people far away from the context where their rights holders are. And the cultural norms that I'm referring here are the stereotypes. They are social norms concerning things, what is considered suitable behavior, for example, for women and men and for people of different genders. I also wanted to point out the weak normative and institutional frameworks. And here by weak, I mean that they are not human rights based, and they are not enough built on an inclusive approach. So legislation and policies set the frame for how societies work, and they are hugely important in determining what is allowed, what is accepted, and what is encouraged. And bluntly said, there is not enough incentives in these systems to prioritize equality currently. So in many cases, it's left up to the goodwill of organizations to promote it, which is not ideal. And also the market values define a lot. So the focus on profit, the focus on speed, which might not always be an issue, but it is when we're rolling out biased systems that then can affect people's employment, health, access to services, and more. So ideally, all digital strategies and public regulations should be human rights based. And there are many good international resolutions and other high-level political statements on this, especially from the United Nations systems and bodies, but they need to actually be also brought to the country level and national legislation policies as well as practices. I think that here also the role of research and academia is hugely important. In the EU, I think that there are many good attempts in the digital sphere for doing this. For example, just to highlight two examples, the Directive on Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence that was adopted last year, and it specifically requires all EU countries to criminalize for distinct forms of cyber violence, also gender-based violence. And also the Pay Transparency Directive that was adopted 2 years ago, and that requires employers to provide salary information to job applicants as well as employees. Then finally, the lack of data, resources, expertise. There is need for more data on digitalization and how gender equality plays a role in it. We need to put resources into proper localization and analysis, and this requires also expertise. Unfortunately, goodwill does not always ensure good results at project level. And in my personal opinion, I think that, for example, in digital projects, they should always employ also inclusion experts, and even more importantly, local people. Because we also need, in addition, a more versatile group of people working within STEM fields. And the tech as a field also needs to form into a place with inclusion at the heart. I promised to explain a bit about the gender transformative approaches. And here I'm using a definition by an EU gender experts working group. So I think that to an extent that is possible, the focus should be on gender transformative approaches, which means focus on addressing the root causes of gender inequalities with the aim of structural change. So moving from treating the symptoms of the inequalities to changing the discriminatory social norms, unequal political, legal, economic structure, and power dynamics, with an intersectional approach and with a human rights-based approach. And to change structures, you need to engage with the communities in question. You need to have discussions with the duty bearers as well as the rights holders, engaging decision makers, opinion leaders, also men and boys, and ideally building partnerships with those who are already locally driving the change, because in most cases there are already those partners that are doing that. And just as an example of what could be the difference between a gender responsive and transformative approaches, for example, in the case of education. So a gender responsive action could be to enable girls transport to school, to give them bicycles or school bus rides or whatever, so that they can actually go to school. Whereas a transformative approach might be, for example, a mainstream gender awareness in teacher training at all levels. So trying to really change how people think and behave and how the system works. And this is obviously not to say at all that we would not need gender responsive actions as well, because of course we do. But I mean, we will need to be doing, if that's all we do, we will have to keep doing them forever, because if we are not really trying to also change the structures that uphold inequalities. I also added there OECD Development Assistance Committee criteria mention. Of course, this is again from the development context, but I think it's a good and simple guideline even beyond development. So they have a 3-point scoring system for projects, whether projects are with a principal, significant, or no gender target. And within EU, the Gender Action Plan that we have in place actually mandates 85% of all new actions related to external relations to contribute to gender equality and women's empowerment by this year, actually by 2025. And the criteria that OECD places on what counts as a project with gender target is that there must be a specific gender equality objective. It has to be explicit. It has to be based on gender analysis and a do no harm approach. And the project needs to be designed to have a positive impact on advancing gender equality. And there also has to be at least one explicit gender-specific indicator, and obviously the monitoring and evaluation on how that moves forward, as well as data and indicators disaggregated by sex wherever applicable. Moving on to even more practice level suggestions or ideas on how this can be done at a project level. First of all, and I think this was touched upon already, I think that there has to be the resources and the commitment to inclusion from the beginning and from the highest levels possible. And here with the resources, I mean, for example, capacity building and expertise in inclusion. So this means a dedicated effort to analyze who is benefiting and who is not from a certain situation, and whether there are adverse impacts for some people and which kind of measures are needed to impactfully and sustainably advance equality. Then there's the engagement of those impacted. So the local people, those that are the ones that are currently living with the phenomena that you want to research or touch upon. And especially deliberate outreach to marginalized groups. And I think that Genoveva already well spoke about these needs and what it is not automatic. It might not be easy. It means that you have to, in many cases, go to the grassroots or a level and work with those communities, because everyone will not be involved just by the simple fact that there has been an open invitation somewhere to do so. Gender analysis is always recommended. I don't think that there's no way around it. You won't know unless you find out. And even if you think you know, it's always advisable to do your homework about the roles that different people with different genders have in a certain setting. What are their accesses to resources? How are the decision-making roles, the power dynamics, and so forth. And only after these steps comes the goal setting for the project or initiative. So what are we going to do actually, and how and who will benefit from it, and how does it uphold or dismantle the topic at hand and the structures that you have identified in the previous analysis. So really trying to go for a needs-based approach and being deliberate about what you want to change and in the benefit of whom and what kind of power structures are at play. And obviously those people, the local people or those impacted, should not just be asked in the beginning about their opinions, but they should be ideally engaged throughout the process. And of course, to begin with, it would be better to have not really a project type of approach, but rather trying to build long-term cooperation and partnerships. Obviously, monitoring and evaluation, as well as having relevant indicators, is very helpful and advisable to be able to track the change that you're doing, as well as accountability frameworks. So instead of mitigating risks, is always better to plan in advance and be transparent about the work. And if needed, then make improvements and corrections throughout the initiative, especially based on the experiences of the impacted people. And if only possible, retain flexibility to modify even throughout the project. Communication is also hugely important for transparency and accountability, but it can also be a driver for change in many ways. And I think that Genoveva already talked about the power of the language, and I can fully just agree. Just as an example, a big Finnish software company a few years ago, they wanted to hire more women. So they looked at their ads, their recruitment ads that they were putting out, and saw how women and men interpret these kind of wordings and these kind of texts that they were putting out. So in the end, they ended up changing some of the adjectives that they were using in their ads. And by simply changing some of the words, some of the wordings, how they describe the work, how they describe the kind of people that they want to and need to have, they very quickly increased the number of women applying to the positions by over 30%. And then, of course, hopefully when all of this happens, there will be cultural and systematic change as well. Some more successful practices from different kind of projects that I've witnessed and seen. Again, recommendation to reach out in the spirit of Agenda 2030, those left furthest behind, even if this often means extra effort. So, for example, UNICEF has worked with girls and women living in refugee camps to support them with information and things such as SRHR, HPV, and they have really co-created and tested solutions with those girls. But of course, this takes years of time, and it again takes a lot of sensitivity to the context that we are in. Another example of Amarta, an Indonesian microfinance fintech company that has worked to enable individuals with limited credit history access to capital. And in most cases, this has been women entrepreneurs that have been labeled not credit worthy because they might not have their personal data or other official records, but they are actually credit worthy. And part of this solution has been to deploy trained field officers to physically visit the villages, to build trust, to explain the lending processes, to help women navigate to mobile phone apps. So really going there and doing things together. Reconsidering leadership and expertise requirements is also something that was touched upon earlier, and I think this is really key, like being critical of what we consider as expertise. I mean, in some cases, we might have very formal ideas, and in many cases, rightly so, about what kind of capacities does a person need to have to be a leader or an expert in a certain context. But I think it pays off to be also critical of this kind of concept. So in many cases, it might be that this kind of criteria that we have does not capture all the relevant information. So in many cases, this could mean that you take as expert someone who might not have a formal training but knows the context perfectly. Or it might mean that you look at for example, Nokia, a big Finnish company as well, they have had this kind of training programs where they have supported women to grow as leaders, and it has not been based on trying to form those women more into being like men, but rather looking at what are the capacities that the women already have and how those match with the needs that they have for leaders. Investing in capacity building is always advisable and a good way to build sustainable development. In many developing contexts, this might also mean that you have to compensate for the time used. So even if you offer the most perfect, free, quality education for people in a certain context, they might not be able to participate simply because they have to prioritize that time for getting a living. So this is also something that was touched upon earlier. So we have to be realistic and we have to be serious about the context and the possibilities of the people. Engaging grassroots, civil society youth, human rights defenders, what I mentioned already in the earlier, that there are people who are already working with these topics locally, so always engaging with them as well and trusting their expertise. And even if whatever brilliant projects or ideas we have in place somewhere, whenever the geographies change, you will have to do context-specific tailoring. So remembering this as well. And then just to highlight that there are many gender and innovation templates, guides, and toolboxes on how to do gender analysis available online. So also leading on the expertise and tools that are already there. I think a good example is also making gender equality a criteria. So not really like Genoveva said that it should not be a checkbox. It's really it's an excellence. It's part of competence to be doing that. It's not just something that you can tick off. It's something where you have to become better. So as you're probably aware, for example, within the EU framework program for research and innovation, the Horizon Europe program, they a few years ago changed the system so that integrating the gender dimension in projects is a requirement nowadays and they want to do it to improve the quality of the research. So they require a gender equality plan. They also look forward to the integration of gender dimension into the research. They also look at the gender balance among the research teams. And yeah, it's part of the criteria how they judge whether this is a good project or not. So it's not a checkbox, it's part of the criteria. Also, qualitative indicators is something that I think has been in many cases helpful because there is a lot of information that is left out if you only rely on statistical data and formal data. And I think I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to say a final sentence about ensuring communication again. So this is important not just for ourselves, but also for doing for the others to have the ability to build on the work that has already been done. And this will help avoiding doing same things over and over again. And it's really in the interest of everyone, not least the local communities. In the end, I had a slide about the resources. I don't know, it's for some reason showing black to me, but here it is. Just some of the resources that I've found useful and helpful, especially in the UN and EU contexts, because that's where I work, but obviously there are a lot more. But I will wrap it up here. Thank you so much, and looking forward to your insights and experiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that great presentation too. We will open the floor for questions and answers. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat or raise your hand if you have a question. So Elizabeth, you have the right, your hand.
Well, thank you very much, and especially to Genoveva and Lisa. I think it's really so interesting and great to hear your presentation. There is one thing I'm wondering, though we are building our gender equality, sometimes diversity policies. But if we want to change things like Genoveva was highlighting, this very liberal, demanding model of research, I'm pretty sure there are also some men who are a bit sick of it, but we don't really include them. And I think it would be important to include them, not only diversity more or less meaning, well, gay men. I'm pretty sure that in our society, some people are really sick of this model of managerial and competitive and power, competition power. And I mean, you all presented great best practices, and but if we want to change things, it has to be also from inside the male community. And I'm wondering, how could we interest also these men, identify them, so that we have a broader community? Because I mean, we have it also here for our webinar. Usually we are only talking to women or people that are already convinced. So that is maybe the thing we could try to think about, how to have men also supporting these policies, because the crucial issue is really the model itself on how we build research and related to power. So that's just an idea. It's not easy to do. I fully agree. But please, sorry. So I'm finished with it. Was just sort of thought, but I shared it already, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I wanted to resonate on our new masculinities project. We've been working at the lab. We decided to do this because there are really more men than women. And we understood that in this context, we have to do something in order to try to change the balance, right? And so indeed, we discovered that these different masculinities in the lab felt felt underrepresented. For example, a very, day by day thing was that there is a cafeteria. And one of our colleagues said that when people go and discuss there, people share about their lives, right? And so when you're a man, they ask you about your wife or about your children. And maybe you don't have a wife, and maybe you do have children, but not with a wife, right? And so he said that he felt really not comfortable to share his life with the others, whereas the others were like talking very freely, etc. Well, that was a thing that we started addressing this by, slogans and information distributed, alerting that, family is not always a man, a woman, etc., so that people could be aware. Another thing is that we resonated about when you're an hegemonic masculinity, you need to be like this with a very strong voice and very intrepid, etc. And there are men that are not like this. And so we alerted the groups in order to try to give the space, for example, in meetings or in invitations to talk, to this kind of profiles, right? And we ended up identifying that there is also in men imposture syndrome. And next week, we are going to have an imposter syndrome activity where a specialist is coming, and we have a male group and a women group and a mixed group in order to address this. But this is quite new, and I think that men do not feel comfortable talking about the way they feel, right? And so this is a huge work to be done, and I think that it's important also in order to change the balance.
Thank you, Genoveva, Elizabeth, Yolanda, the hand raised.
Thank you, Genoveva and Luisa, for this wonderful presentation. It's always a pleasure to learn from your thoughts. So congratulations. And I have a question for both of you. How do you think the current political situation worldwide is impacting the progress on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Lisa, do you want to take it first?
Please go ahead. I can follow you.
There is a huge question. I mean, I work with a group that is a database conference group, where conferences, I mean, major conferences in my discipline are organized and led by the US, right? So there is a strategy that we are developing in order to protect current actions that we have to avoid the, you know, in the harm of political harm in the US, but in general, what we are trying to reflect on is to which extent our community is ready to face reluctancy on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what are the side effects of being very aggressive, if you want, in order to defend these values? Because people might have problems in order to be hired, in order to travel comfortably, in order to access to funds. And so we have like two perspectives. The first one is try to protect what we have, and then as a community decide how much and how hard are we going to defend the values. And we are there, we don't know.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you to Elizabeth for the great question about the role of men and boys, and I think that that's crucial. And unfortunately, I don't have really a solution for that. There are these initiatives, and I think that they are hugely important. But I think it's really like urgent that we need to have a broader group promoting these things as possible. And this is also related to the question from Yolanda about the backlash that is urgent, and it's huge, and it's really impacting all the work in major ways. So of course, simply the cuts in funding for gender equality for development, they are life-threatening. They are really changing lives all the time, and it's a difficult one to balance, because obviously resources are not endless for anyone, so it will be very difficult to compensate for that, at least in the short term. But I think that this only emphasizes the need there is for the different players to come together and really work in a coherent manner and try to support each other's work. Also, one of the strategies to mitigate this situation is trying to make the point on not just the intrinsic value of human rights and gender equality, but also of the economic reasoning, because there is also a very strong point. If you want to use your dollars or euros in an impactful way, then gender equality and supporting the engagement and education and employment of women and girls and people of all genders and backgrounds, it has a very strong case, so to say. So then trying to modify the reasoning to also include more the economic stakes is one of the ways to try to push for it. We're not only talking about social norms, we're actually also talking about how societies can thrive.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Genoveva. I don't know if someone else have another question. Yes, Joanna. We can hear you, Joanna.
Now? Yeah, it's better.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Genoveva. Really inspiring talks. I have one question. It's mainly it came up during Genoveva's presentation, but also Lisa, I would love to get your input as well. It's when Genoveva, you presented the questionnaire that you did, and there was a lower rate of international mobility of female researchers, and you said it's due to family backgrounds and that women would rather not travel so much or go abroad. And I was wondering, is that really something that is assumed as a reason, or has this been really validated? Because when I travel a lot for European projects, I travel a lot to US, Canada, Brazil. I interview a lot of people, and also men have told me, well, it's not the time actually to go international at the moment because I have young children. So really, I heard this quite a bit by men. And then, so maybe this is a two-split question. And then one of the reasons that came up for me was maybe some females, and maybe subconsciously I'm also belonging to this part, do not travel so much, or not where they could best fulfill their research career due to fear of physical violence. Or, I mean, as a woman, often I have to think very in advance. How do I get from A to B? Well, I make very precise travel plans, which some men probably do not have to do simply because they feel safer. So quite a long explanation, but maybe I would like to hear what you think of it. Yeah.
Yes, when we asked, I mean, it's a logistics aspect. Of course, family, or if you're a caregiver or whatever, that is an important aspect. But this, as you said, also touches men. And I fully agree with respect to these other aspects of logistics. For example, in the lab we used to run, as I said, the lab is located in a kind of difficult zone, right? So, and it's in Mexico City. So, if you accept to go to another location, you have also to accept that you are going to take transport or take more time in order to reach the place, etc. So, indeed, the difference about how you plan your trip is really related to your gender, right? And I think that it is there where we have to give a focus. And us, we never succeeded to have some solution for that, right? Because the problem, and I think that I always relate the possibilities you can have in order to have to reduce the gender gap with also funding. I mean, who is going to invest or who is going to help you, for example, look for a hotel or a residence in a better zone? This means that the hotel will be more expensive. And so, and the budgets are, I mean, limited. So, how do you integrate this? Another aspect is, for example, flights. Let's assume that the person decides to go with his or her children and travel, together. We used to have a problem that when you reserve your flight in the official system, of course, it allows you to reserve your flight. But if you are flying with a child, you need the child to be seated near to you. And therefore, you have to buy the tickets together. Otherwise, you cannot guarantee this. But the system sometimes doesn't allow you to buy together the ticket, even if you are paying for it. So you see, these kind of little elements have to be revisited somehow. And well, we need to convince, of course, institutions, administration practices, and all this in order to give the possibility to feel to people to feel comfortable and travel. Yeah, that's what I can say.
Thank you so much for the question, and nothing big to add really to what was already said. So statistically, we know that women have considerably more caregiving roles than men do. Also, women, for example, use more public transport. For women, women often feel more insecure in city settings. So this kind of very practical things like lighting and others have more of a role for women than men. And yeah, so this is the reality that we will then need to mitigate.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you all. I think we are now reaching the end of today's session. On behalf of the Spider Community of Practice, I would like to thank you a lot to our speakers, Dr. Genoveva Vargas and Lisa Kitule, for sharing their experiences and their ideas with us. A big thank you also to all of you that joined in today and for being part of these important discussions. And also, I want to remind you, if you haven't registered in our community of practice, I invite you to join us. I put the link here in the chat, and we look forward to see you again in future activities of our community of practice. Thank you a lot and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
you.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
invitation.
Bye bye.
Thank you.